Hi there and welcome to a new video in which we're gonna be comparing how Godot handles game objects and the difference is that it has if we compare it to how Unity does the exact same thing, okay? That is for you to comprehend a little bit both systems, contrast them, see maybe which one is better for which circumstances, and overall learn a little bit. So let's firstly talk a little bit about Godot. So the game objects of Godot are called nodes. Nodes are the basic creation unit and you have nodes for everything. So we have nodes, for example, for UI, okay, and every single UI element is a separated node. So if we have a container, well, this is one node. If we want a button, we have another node. And that's basically how it works. So you start nesting down nodes and nodes. For example, if we take a look at the player, well, we have the base player node, which is a character body 3D node, okay, which basically has some properties in Inspector that allow us to have more control over the node itself. It's a node designed for movement via script, basically. Because it, for example, has some pretty interesting methods such as or variables, for example, the velocity variable, which is a built-in value. We also have the move and slide, move and collide methods, ease on floor, so very useful stuff. Then we have the collider itself, okay, the hitbox. Then we have another node, which is just a root node head. Inside of here, we have another node, which is the camera. Then we have a sub viewport, another camera, a raycast. We have a shadow here, we have an audio source here, or actually here an audio stream player as another node, and a timer as another node. So as you can see, the idea in Godot is that you start nesting the different components of the scene, okay, down below, okay, and that is the node system. So let's start actually writing down these differences. So on the one hand, we have Godot, okay, and on the other hand, we have Unity, okay? So as we have seen, in terms of, let me just put a line here, in terms of the creation unit or yeah, the game objects themselves, they are called nodes. And the key thing here is that you nest each component under each node, okay? That's it, okay? Now, if we talk about Unity, this is a 2D RPG game, for example. So here's a little bit different, but at the same time, they share the same logic. So for example, I will go just here to the characters, and here we have the enemy. For example, let's actually take a look at the player itself. So here we have the player on the left, so this will be like the player node, but in this case, in Unity, we don't have nodes with specific purposes. Remember that in Godot, we have our nodes for specific purposes. We have a character body 3D node because it has some properties that allow us to easily move it. We have a collider that specifically has these components here, these attributes, however you want to call them. We have the camera, which of course has certain components, such as here a camera 3D, to be able to actually render image and all that. But in Unity, we don't have that kind of classification. So everything by scratch is an empty game object, okay? So it has nothing but a transform, okay? Just so that we can, as you can see, position it in the scene, but that's all is a marker. It will be the equivalent as creating a node, as you can see. Well, this even has more options. This doesn't even has a transform, so it will be the equivalent to a node 3D in 3D space or very similar to that. And how it works here is that basically you nest down components inside the same object, okay? So for example, if we take a look at the player, we have one base player, okay? We still have some stuff inside, but it's not as much. As you can see here, we only have like 2 objects inside, okay? And here we have like more, okay? And also the logic is a little different because in the player, for example, well, this is a 3D game versus a 2D game, but for example here, well, we have no model, but if we wanted to have a 3D model here, it would be a separated node. Well, in Unity also, it would be a separated game object, but for example, in a 2D game, you have the same character body 2D, the collision, and then the sprite 2D. But in Unity, you have everything the same, in the same node, let's say, in the same game object. You have here the sprite renderer, which as you can see, basically renders this character image. We also have a player input, is just to be able to detect the input and then read it in the player movement. In this case, for the rigid body, which in reality is a completely separated node in Godot, well, we have it right inside of here. Once again, the animator, we have something very similar in Godot, which is called the animation player. It's the exact same thing. So once again, rather than having it as a separate object, we have it everything here. Once again, the collision right here inside. So the key thing with Unity is that what we have are game objects themselves. I believe that the name is a little bit more intuitive. And the idea here is that you nest components in the game object. Okay. So you can still separate this logic a little bit. So you could still, for example, have another game object inside here that has the sprite, specifically the sprite. You could still do it, but it's not something really done, because if you can have it inside here, it's way more organized. But as you can see, still in Unity, we do have some stuff that can be inside. So for example, I have here a weapons container, which, well, has the base attack, which is the knife, okay, or the sword. And I also have the shooter, which is like this thing here that shoots projectiles. Okay. And well, in this case, we do have them as separated objects themselves, because they have a completely different logic. As you can see here, we are nesting down objects, not because we want, let's say, different objects that are related to a player itself, such as a collision, a sprite, etc. But this is something completely different and separated, okay, from the player. In this case, it's just we have the weapons themselves, okay. Of course, with their own logic. For example, here the base has its own animator, its own collision, and so you can see the hierarchy does not extend as much as it would do with Godot, okay. So the key thing here is that these objects here have a point in space, as you can see. So because these weapons, I can move them around and do all that. So that's why they are completely different objects, because they must have their own transform separated from the player itself. So you see how the logic actually is different. So now if we continue talking about that, now that we understand the logic, that okay, in Godot we have nodes, the basic creation unit. So let me actually put this as our title, the basic creation unit. Oops. In Godot is called nodes, and Unity is game objects. Then in terms of hierarchy, okay, in Godot you nest each component under each node. So you have, okay, your root player node, you have as a completely separate game object the collision, as a completely separate game object the shadow, as a completely separate game object the audio. Whereas in Unity, everything is nested as components in the exact same game objects. So if we talk about advantages and disadvantages of each of them, first of all, in Unity, at least for me, it is a little bit easy, well, not easier, but more organized, okay, because it occupies less space in the hierarchy, basically. So as you can see here, we have, like, in one game object, a lot of things: sprite renderer, animator, box collider, and we have everything in the same object. And if we were in Godot, we would have 3 different objects for that. So at least for me, it's a little bit more organized. Now, definitely Godot is a little bit more beginner friendly. Why is this? Because the fact that you have, and the fact that you have, okay, one specific node for one specific usage is a little bit easier, usually for beginners, at least for me, and for a lot of people that I've heard. This node system is a little bit easier. Now, then another thing is that this one is more flexible, whereas this one is a little bit more rigid. Now, why exactly? This is, let's say, complicated here just to mention in a video, but the cool thing is that in Unity, you can add as many scripts as you want in a script, so in a game object. So for example, in the player, I have this player movement script, and I have player attack, character collision, player death. I have many scripts, so this allows me to follow a solid keyword that or actually not keyword, but one of the concepts of solid, which is the S, is the single responsibility. So basically each class has a specific and just one responsibility. So the player attack just handles the attack, the player death just handles dying, the player movement just the movement, the weapons container just the weapons themselves. So you can attach multiple scripts to the same object and have your logic super well organized. That's something that I love about Unity. But in Godot, you can you can have one player movement script, then another player attack script. You have one base player script, and here you must have everything. So that's why, for example, here this player script has a lot of lines, hundreds of lines here, and there are ways of separating it because you can still, for example, create a base node here and handle your logic, separate logic. But once again, it's not something really used. It's not the philosophy of Godot itself. But once again, I don't really like that, or at least I'm way more accustomed, and I think it's way more intuitive to just have multiple scripts attached to the same game object. But well, still, this is something very personal. This is the way in which you handle creation units, the basic creation units. So this is something that heavily relies on what you like, what you don't like, the type of game that you're creating, how your brain thinks and works. At least mine works way better with what Unity provides me. Once again, everything nested in the same game object, that's components, everything more organized, everything way more flexible. But well, I believe that the system that Godot has, as you, for example, cannot have multiple scripts in the same node, and you have specific nodes for each thing that you want in your game. That you want a camera, okay, you have the camera node. You want audio, you have the specific camera node. That's way easier for beginners, okay? But I think it is still a little bit too beginner friendly, a little bit too rigid, and that's why whenever you want to scale your game a little bit, at least for me, it becomes a little bit rigid and incomplete. So anyway, let me know what you think. And something that is very cool is that if you go to the description of the video and you click this first link, you will be enjoying 1 free month of Skillshare, and you will also be getting 60% off your first month. And here I have basically all my Godot, Python, Unity courses. For example, you have this huge Unity course, you have this another pretty interesting Godot course, once again, by just signing up here completely for free for your first month. Or if you want to access these courses separately, okay, you have them on Udemy also. So for example, this one has been pretty popular with my students. As you can see, an amazing rating, and we have 14 ratings right now, and more than 50 students have already enrolled. Okay, these links have sometimes amazing discounts. For example, this one has a 35% off for just 4 days left right now, and same thing with these ones, for example. So make sure that if you have just entered the link and you have seen them under this one, I really make sure that you add them to your cart or buy them right now, so that you make sure that you can have them at the best price. Because if not, as I said, for example, this one is something like $45, and with the discount it's just 13. So it's a pretty huge discount for you to take advantage of. So I will see you there and see you in the next one. Bye bye.